Chapter 7. How Robin Hood Met Friar Tuck. The friar took Robin Hood on his back, deep water he did bestride, and spake neither good word nor bad, till he came at the other side. In the summer time, when leaves grow green and flowers are fresh and gay, Robin Hood and his merry men were all disposed to play. Thus runs a quaint old ballad which begins the next adventure. Then some would leap, and some would run, and some try archery, and some ply the quarterstaff, and some fall to with the good broadsword. Some again would try around at buffet and fisticuff, and thus, by every variety of sport and exercise, they perfected themselves in skill, and made the band and its prowess well known throughout all England. It had been a custom of Robin Hood's to pick out the best men in all the countryside. Whenever he heard of one more than usually skilled in any feat of arms, he would seek the man and test him in personal encounter, which did not always end happily for Robin, and when he found a man to his liking, he offered him service with the bold fellows of Sherwood Forest. Thus it came about that one day, after a practice at shooting, in which Little John struck down a hart at 500 feet distance, Robin Hood was vain to boast. "God's blessing on your heart," he cried, clapping the burly fellow on the shoulder. "I would travel 100 miles to find one who could match you." At this Will Scarlet laughed full roundly. "There lives a curtal friar in Fountain's Abbey, Tuck by name, who can beat both him and you," he said. Robin pricked up his ears at this free speech. "By Our Lady," he said, "I'll neither eat nor drink till I see this same friar." And with his usual impetuosity he at once set about arming himself for the adventure. On his head he placed a cap of steel. Underneath his Lincoln green he wore a coat of chain metal. Then with sword and buckler girded at his side he made a goodly show. But he also took with him his stout yew bow and a sheaf of chosen arrows. So he set forth upon his way with blithe heart. For it was a day when the whole face of the earth seemed glad and rejoicing in pulsing life. Steadily he pressed forward by winding ways till he came to a green broad pasture land at whose edge flowed a stream dipping in and out among the willows and rushes on the banks. A pleasant stream it was, but it flowed calmly as though of some depth in the middle. Robin did not fancy getting his feet wet, or his fine suit of mail rusted, so he paused on the hither bank to rest and take his bearings. As he sat down quietly under the shade of a drooping willow, he heard snatches of a jovial song floating to him from the farther side. Then came a sound of two men's voices arguing. One was upholding the merits of hasty pudding, and the other stood out stoutly for meat pie. "Especially," quoth this one, "when flavored with young onions." "Gramercy," muttered Robin to himself, "that is a tantalizing speech to a hungry man. But, odds bodkins, did ever two men talk more alike than those two fellows yonder?" In truth, Robin could well marvel at the speech, for the voices were curiously alike. Presently the willows parted on the other bank, and Robin could hardly forbear laughing outright. His mystery was explained. It was not two men who had done all this singing and talking, but one, and that one a stout curtal friar who wore a long cloak over his portly frame, tied with a cord in the middle. On his head was a knight's helmet, and in his hand was a no more warlike weapon than a huge pasty pie, with which he sat down by the water's edge. His twofold argument was finished. The meat pie had triumphed, and no wonder, for it was the present witness, soon to give its own testimony. But first the friar took off his helmet to cool his head, and a droll picture he made. His head was as round as an apple, and eke as smooth in spots. A fringe of close curling black hair grew round the base of his skull, but his crown was bare and shiny as an egg. His cheeks also were smooth and red and shiny, and his little gray eyes danced about with the funniest air imaginable. You would not have blamed Robin Hood for wanting to laugh, had you heard this serious, two-faced talk, and then seen this jovial, one-faced man. Good humor and fat living stood out all over him, yet for all that he looked stout enough and able to take care of himself with any man. His short neck was thick like that of a Berkshire bull, His shoulders were set far back, and his arms sprouted therefrom like two oak limbs. As he sat him down, the cloak fell apart, disclosing a sword and buckler as stout as Robin's own. Natheless, Robin was not dismayed at sight of the weapons. Instead, his heart fell within him when he saw the meat pie, which was now in fair way to be devoured before his very eyes. For the friar lost no time in thrusting one hand deep into the pie, while he crossed himself with the other. Thereupon Robin seized his bow and fitted a shaft. "Hey, friar," he sang out, "carry me over the water, or else I cannot answer for your safety." The other started at the unexpected greeting, and laid his hand upon his sword. Then he looked up and beheld Robin's arrow pointing full upon him. "Put down your bow, fellow," he shouted back, "and I will bring you over the brook. 'Tis our duty in life to help each other, and your keen shaft shows me that you are a man worthy of some attention." So the friar knight got him up gravely, though his eyes twinkled with a cunning light, and laid aside his beloved pie, and his cloak, and his sword and buckler, and waded across the stream with waddling dignity. Then he took Robin Hood upon his back, and spoke neither good word nor bad till he came to the other side. Lightly leaped Robin off his back, and said, "I am much beholden to you, good father." "Beholden, say you?" rejoined the other, drawing his sword. "Then by my faith you shall even repay your score. Now mine own affairs, which are of a spiritual kind and much more important than yours, which are carnal, lie on the other side of this stream. I see that you are a likely man and one, moreover, who would not refuse to serve the church. I must therefore pray of you that whatsoever I have done unto you, you will also do unto me. In short, my son, you must e'en carry me back again." Courteously enough was this said, but so suddenly had the friar drawn his sword that Robin had no time to unsling his bow from his back, whither he had placed it to avoid getting it wet, or to unfasten his scabbard, so he was fain to temporize. "Nay, good father, but I shall get my feet wet," he commenced. "Are your feet any better than mine?" retorted the other. "I fear now that I have already wetted myself so sadly as to lay in a store of rheumatic pains by way of penance." "I am not so strong as you," continued Robin, "that helmet and sword and buckler would be my undoing on an uncertain footing amidstream, to say nothing of your holy flesh and bones." "Then I will lighten up somewhat," replied the other calmly. "Promise to carry me across, and I will lay aside my war gear." "Agreed," said Robin, and the friar thereupon stripped himself, and Robin bent his stout back and took him up even as he had promised. Now the stones at the bottom of the stream were round and slippery, and the current swept along strongly, waist deep in the middle. Moreover, Robin had a heavier load than the other had borne, nor did he know the ford. So he went stumbling along now, stepping into a deep hole, now stumbling over a boulder in a manner that threatened to unseat his rider or plunge them both clear under current. But the fat friar hung on and dug his heels into his steed's ribs in as gallant manner as if he were riding in a tournament, while as for poor Robin, the sweat ran down him in torrents and he gasped like the winded horse he was. But at last he managed to stagger out on the bank and deposit his unwieldy load. No sooner had he sat the friar down than he seized his own sword. "Now, holy friar," quoth he, panting and wiping the sweat from his brow, "what say the scriptures that you quote so glibly? Be not weary of well-doing. You must carry me back again, or I swear that I will make a cheesecloth out of your jacket." The friar's gray eyes once more twinkled with a cunning gleam that boded no good to Robin, but his voice was as calm and courteous as ever. "Your wits are keen, my son," he said, "and I see that the waters of the stream have not quenched your spirit. Once more will I bend my back to the oppressor and carry the weight of the haughty." So Robin mounted again in high glee, and carried his sword in his hand and went prepared to tarry upon the other side. But while he was bethinking himself what great words to use when he should arrive thither, he felt himself slipping from the friar's broad back. He clutched frantically to save himself, but had too round a surface to grasp, besides being hampered by his weapon. So down went he with a loud splash into the middle of the stream, where the crafty friar had conveyed him. "There," quoth the holy man, "choose you, Choose you, my fine fellow, whether you will sink or swim." And he gained his own bank without more ado, while Robin thrashed and spluttered about until he made shift to grasp a willow wand and thus haul himself ashore on the other side. Then Robin's rage waxed furious, despite his wetting, and he took his bow and arrows and let fly one shaft after another at the worthy friar, but they rattled harmlessly off his steel buckler, while he laughed and minded them no more than if they had been hailstones. Shoot on, good fellow," he sang out. "Shoot as you have begun. If you shoot here a summer's day, your mark I will not shun." So Robin shot, and passing well, till all his arrows were gone, when from very rage he began to revile him. "You bloody villain," shouted he, "you psalm-singing hypocrite, you reviler of good hasty pudding, come but within reach of my sword arm, and, friar or no friar, I'll shave your tonsure closer than ever bald-pated monk was shaven before." "Soft you and fair," said the friar unconcernedly. "Hard words are cheap, and you may need your wind presently. And you would like a bout with swords. Meet me halfway in the stream." And with this speech the friar waded into the brook, sword in hand, where he was met halfway by the impetuous outlaw. Thereupon began a fierce and mighty battle. Up and down, in and out, back and forth they fought. The swords flashed in the rays of the declining sun and then met with a clash that would have shivered less sturdy weapons or disarmed less sturdy wielders. Many a smart blow was landed, but each perceived that the other wore an undercoat of linked mail which might not be pierced. Natheless, their ribs ached at the force of the blows. Once and again they paused by mutual consent and caught breath, and looked hard each at the other, for never had either met so stout a fellow. Finally, in a furious onslaught of lunge and parry, Robin's foot stepped on a rolling stone, and he went down upon his knees. But his antagonist would not take this advantage. He paused until Robin should get upon his feet. "Now, by Our Lady," cried the outlaw, using his favorite oath, "you are the fairest swordsman that I have met in many a long day. I would beg a boon of you." "What is it?" said the other. "Give me leave to set my horn to my mouth and blow 3 blasts thereon." "That will I do," said the curtall friar. "Blow till your breath fails, an it please you." Then, says the old ballad, Robin Hood set his horn to mouth and blew mighty blasts, and 100 yeomen, bows bent, came raking over the lea. "Whose men are these," said the friar, "that come so hastily?" "These men are mine," said Robin Hood, feeling that his time to laugh was come at last. Then said the friar in his turn, a boon, the like I give to you. Give me leave to set my fist to my mouth, and whistle 3 blasts thereon." "That will I do," said Robin, "or else I were lacking in courtesy." The friar set his fist to his mouth, and put the horn to shame by the piercing whistles he blew, whereupon 100 great dogs came running and jumping so swiftly that they had reached their bank as soon as Robin Hood's men had reached his side. Then followed a rare foolish conflict. Stuteley, Much, Little John, and the other outlaws began sending their arrows whizzing toward the opposite bank, but the dogs, which were taught of the friar, dodged the missiles cleverly and ran and fetched them back again, just as the dogs of today catch sticks. "I have never seen the like of this in my days," cried Little John, amazed. "'Tis rank sorcery and witchcraft." "Take off your dogs, Friar Tuck," shouted Will Scarlet, who had but then run up, and who now stood laughing heartily at the scene. "Friar Tuck!" exclaimed Robin, astounded. "Are you Friar Tuck? Then am I your friend, for you are he I came to seek." "I am but a poor anchorite, a curtall friar," said the other, whistling to his pack. "By name Friar Tuck of Fountain's-Dale. For 7 years have I tended the abbey here, preached o' Sundays, and married and christened and buried folk, and fought too if need were, and if it smacks not too much of boasting, I have not yet met the knight or trooper or yeoman that I would yield before. But yours is a stout blade. I would fain know you." "'Tis Robin Hood, the outlaw, who has been assisting you at this christening," said Will Scarlet, glancing roguishly at the 2 opponents' dripping garments. And at this sally the whole band burst into a shout of laughter in which Robin and Friar Tuck joined. "Robin Hood!" cried the good friar presently, holding his sides. "Are you indeed that famous yeoman?" Then I like you well, and had I known you earlier, would have both carried you across and shared my pasty pie with you." "To speak soothly," replied Robin gaily, "'twas the same pie that led me to be rude. Now, therefore, bring it and your dogs and repair with us to the greenwood. We have need of you. With this message came I today to seek you. We will build you a hermitage in Sherwood Forest, and you shall keep us from evil ways. Will you not join our band?" "Marry, that will I," cried Friar Tuck jovially. "Once more will I cross this much beforded stream, and go with you to the good greenwood." So ends Chapter 7. Chapter 8. How Allan a Dale's wooing was prospered. "What is thy name?" then said Robin Hood. "Come tell me without any fail." "By the faith of my body," then said the young man, "my name it is Allan a Dale." Friar Tuck and Much, the miller's son, soon became right good friends over the steaming stew they jointly prepared for the merry men that evening. Tuck was mightily pleased when he found a man in the forest who could make pasties and who had cooked for no less person than the High Sheriff himself, while Much marveled at the friar's knowledge of herbs and simples and woodland things which savored a stew greatly. So they gabbled together like two old gossips, and between them made such a tasty mess that Robin Hood and his stout followers were like never to leave off eating. And the friar said grace, too, with great unction, over the food, and Robin said amen, and that henceforth they were always to have mass of Sundays. So Robin walked forth into the wood that evening with his stomach full and his heart, therefore, in great contentment and love for other men. He did not stop the first passer-by, as his manner often was, and desire a fight. Instead, he stepped behind a tree when he heard a man's voice in song, and waited to behold the singer. Perhaps he remembered also the merry chanting of Will Scarlet, and how he had tried to give it pause a few days before. Like Will, this fellow was clad in scarlet, though he did not look quite as fine a gentleman. Natheless, he was a sturdy yeoman of honest face and a voice far sweeter than Will's. He seemed to be a strolling minstrel, for he bore a harp in his hand, which he thrummed, while his lusty tenor voice rang out with, "Hey down and a down and a down, I've a lassie back in the town. Come day, come night, come dark or light, she will wed me back in the town." Robin let the singer pass, caroling on his way. "'Tis not in me to disturb a light-hearted lover this night," he muttered, a memory of Marian coming back to him. "Pray heaven she may be true to him and the wedding a gay one, back in the town." So Robin went back to his camp where he told of the minstrel. "If any of ye set on him after this," quoth he in ending, "bring him to me, for I would have speech with him." The very next day his wish was gratified. Little John and Much, the miller's son, were out together on a foraging expedition when they espied the same young man. At least they thought it must be he, for he was clad in scarlet and carried a harp in his hand. But now he came drooping along the way. His scarlet was all in tatters, and at every step he fetched a sigh. Alack and a well a day! Then stepped forth Little John and Much, the miller's son. "Ho! Do not wet the earth with your weeping," said Little John, "else we shall all have lumbago." No sooner did the young man catch sight of them than he bent his bow, and held an arrow back to his ear. Stand off, he said. "What is your will with me?" "Put by your weapon," said Much. "We will not harm you, but you must come before our master straight, under yon greenwood tree." So the minstrel put by his bow and suffered himself to be led before Robin Hood. "How now," quoth Robin, when he beheld his sorry countenance, "are you not he whom I heard no longer ago than yesternight caroling so blithely about a lassie back in the town?" "The same in body, good sir," replied the other sadly, "but my spirit is grievously changed." "Tell me your tale," said Robin courteously. "Belike I can help you." "That can no man on earth, I fear," said the stranger. "Natheless I'll tell you the tale. Yesterday I stood pledged to a maid, and thought soon to wed her. But she has been taken from me, and is to become an old knight's bride this very day. And as for me, I care not what ending comes to my days, or how soon, without her." "Marry, come up," said Robin. "How got the old knight so sudden vantage?" "Look you, worship, 'tis this way. The Normans overrun us, and are in such great favor that none may say them nay. This old returned crusader coveted the land whereon my lady dwells. The estate is not large, but all in her own right, whereupon her brother says she shall wed a title, and he and the old knight have fixed it up for today." "Nay, but surely," began Robin. "Hear me out, worship," said the other. "Belike you think me a sorry dog not to make fight of this. But the old knight, look you, is not come atable. I threw one of his varlets into a thorn hedge, and another into a water butt, and a third landed head first into a ditch, but I couldn't do any fighting at all." "'Tis a pity," quoth Little John gravely. He had been sitting cross-legged listening to this tale of woe. "What think you, Friar Tuck? Doth not a bit of fighting ease a man's mind?" "Bloodletting is oft times recommended of the leeches," replied Tuck. "Does the maid love you?" asked Robin Hood. "By our troth, she loved me right well," said the minstrel. "I have a little ring of hers by me, which I have kept for 7 long years." "What is your name?" then said Robin Hood. "By the faith of my body," replied the young man, "my name is Allan a Dale." "What will you give me, Allan a Dale," said Robin Hood, "in ready gold or fee to help you to your true love again, and deliver her back unto you?" "I have no money, save only 5 shillings," quoth Allan. "But are you not Robin Hood?" Robin nodded. "Then you, if anyone, can aid me," said Allan a Dale eagerly, "and if you give me back my love, I swear upon the book that I will be your true servant for ever after." "Where is this wedding to take place, and when?" asked Robin. "At Plimpton Church, scarce 5 miles from here, at 3 o'clock of the afternoon." "Then to Plimpton we will go," cried Robin suddenly springing into action, and he gave out orders like a general. "Will Stuteley, do you have 24 good men over against Plimpton Church against 3 o'clock of the afternoon? Much, good fellow, do you cook up some porridge for this youth, for he must have a good round stomach, aye, and a better gear. Will Scarlet, you will see to decking him out bravely for the nonce. And Friar Tuck, hold yourself in readiness, good book in hand at the church. Mayhap you had best go ahead of us all." The fat Bishop of Hereford was full of pomp and importance that day at Plimpton Church. He was to celebrate the marriage of an old knight, a returned crusader, and a landed young woman, and all the gentry thereabout were to grace the occasion with their presence. The church itself was gaily festooned with flowers for the ceremony, while out in the churchyard at one side brown ale flowed freely for all the servitors. Already were the guests beginning to assemble, when the bishop, back in the vestry, saw a minstrel clad in green walk up boldly to the door and peer within. It was Robin Hood, who had borrowed Allan's beribboned harp for the time. "Now who are you, fellow?" quoth the bishop, "and what do you here at the church door with your harp and saucy air?" "May it please your reverence," returned Robin, bowing very humbly, "I am but a strolling harper, yet likened the best in the whole north country, and I had hoped that my thrumming might add zest to the wedding today." "What tune can you harp?" demanded the bishop. "I can harp a tune so merry that a forlorn lover will forget he is jilted," said Robin. "I can harp another tune that will make a bride forsake her lord at the altar. I can harp another tune that will bring loving souls together, though they were up hill and down dale 5 good miles away from each other." "Then welcome, good minstrel," said the bishop. "Music pleases me right well, and if you can play up to your prattle, 'twill indeed grace your ceremony. Let us have a sample of your wares." "Nay, I must not put finger to string until the bride and groom have come. Such a thing would ill fortune both us and them." "Have it as you will," said the bishop, "but here comes the party now." Then up the lane to the church came the old knight, preceded by 10 archers liveried in scarlet and gold. A brave sight the archers made, but their master walked slowly, leaning upon a cane and shaking as though in a palsy. And after them came a sweet lass, leaning upon her brother's arm. Her hair did shine like glistening gold, and her eyes were like blue violets that peep out shyly at the sun. The color came and went in her cheeks like that tinting of a seashell, and her face was flushed as though she had been weeping. But now she walked with a proud air, as though she defied the world to crush her spirit. She had but 2 maids with her, finikin lasses, with black eyes and broad bosoms, who set off their lady's more delicate beauty well. One held up the bride's gown from the ground, the other carried flowers in plenty. "Now, by all the wedding bells that ever were rung," quoth Robin boldly, This is the worst matched pair that ever mine eyes beheld." "Silence, miscreant," said a man who stood near. The bishop had hurriedly donned his gown and now stood ready to meet the couple at the chancel. But Robin paid no heed to him. He let the knight and his 10 archers pass by, then he strode up to the bride, and placed himself on the other side from her brother. "Courage, lady," he whispered, "there is another minstrel near, who mayhap play more to your liking." The lady glanced at him with a frightened air, but read such honesty and kindness in his glance that she brightened and gave him a grateful look. "Stand aside, fool," cried the brother wrathfully. "Nay, but I am to bring good fortune to the bride by accompanying her through the church doors," said Robin, laughing. Thereupon he was allowed to walk by her side unmolested up to the chancel with the party. "Now strike up your music, fellow," ordered the bishop. "Right gladly will I," quoth Robin, "and you will let me choose my instrument, for sometimes I like the harp, and other times I think the horn makes the merriest music in all the world." And he drew forth his bugle from underneath his green cloak, and blew 3 winding notes that made the church rafters ring again. "Seize him!" yelled the bishop. "There's mischief afoot. These are the tricks of Robin Hood." The 10 liveried archers rushed forward from the rear of the church, where they had been stationed. But their rush was blocked by the onlookers, who now rose from their pews in alarm and crowded the aisles. Meanwhile Robin had leaped lightly over the chancel rail and stationed himself in a nook by the altar. "Stand where you are," he shouted, drawing his bow. "The first man to pass the rail dies the death. And all ye who have come to witness a wedding, stay in your seats. We shall e'en have one, since we are come into the church. But the bride shall choose her own swain." Then up rose another great commotion at the door, and 24 good bowmen came marching in with Will Stuteley at their head, and they seized the 10 liveried archers and the bride's scowling brother and the other men on guard and bound them prisoners. Then in came Allan a Dale, decked out gaily, with Will Scarlet for best man, and they walked gravely down the aisle and stood over against the chancel. "Before a maiden weds she chooses, and the laws of good King Harry be just ones," said Robin. "Now, maiden, before this wedding continues, whom will you have to husband?" The maiden answered not in words, but smiled with a glad light in her eyes, and walked over to Allan and clasped her arms about his neck. "That is her true love," said Robin, "young Allan instead of the gouty knight, and the true lovers shall be married at this time before we depart away. Now, my lord bishop, proceed with the ceremony." "Nay, that shall not be," protested the bishop. "The banes must be cried 3 times in the church. Such is the law of our land. Come here, Little John," called Robin impatiently, and plucked off the bishop's frock from his back and put it on the yeoman. Now the bishop was short and fat, and Little John was long and lean. The gown hung loosely over Little John's shoulders and came only to his waist. He was a fine comical sight, and the people began to laugh consumedly at him. "By the faith of my body," said Robin, "this cloth makes you a man. You are the finest bishop that ever I saw in my life. Now cry the banes." So Little John clambered awkwardly into the choir, his short gown fluttering gaily, and he called the banes for the marriage of the maid and Allan a Dale once, twice, and thrice. "That's not enough," said Robin. "Your gown is so short that you must talk longer." Then Little John asked them in the church 4, 5, 6, and 7 times. "Good enough," said Robin. "Now belike I see a worthy friar in the back of this church who can say a better service than ever my Lord Bishop of Hereford. My Lord Bishop shall be witness and seal the papers, but do you, good friar, bless this pair with book and candle." So Friar Tuck, who all along had been back in one corner of the church, came forward, and Allan and his maid kneeled before him, while the old knight, held an unwilling witness, gnashed his teeth in impotent rage, and the friar began with the ceremony. When he asked, "Who giveth this woman?" Robin stepped up and answered in a clear voice, "I do, I, Robin Hood of Barnesdale and Sherwood, and he who takes her from Allan a Dale shall buy her full dearly." So the twain were declared man and wife and duly blessed, and the bride was kissed by each sturdy yeoman, beginning with Robin Hood. Now I cannot end this jolly tale better than in the words of the ballad which came out of the happening, and which has been sung in the villages and countryside ever since. And thus having end of this merry wedding, the bride looked like a queen. And so they returned to the merry greenwood, amongst the leaves so green. So ends chapter 8. Chapter 9. How the Widow's 3 Sons were Rescued. Now Robin Hood is to Nottingham gone, with a link a down and a down, and there he met with the proud sheriff, was walking along the town. The wedding party was a merry one that left Plympton Church, I ween, but not so merry were the ones left behind. My Lord Bishop of Hereford was stuck up in the organ loft and left, gownless and fuming. The 10 liveried archers were variously disposed about the church to keep him company, 2 of them being locked in a tiny crypt, 3 in the belfry, to ring us a wedding peal, as Robin said, and the others under choir seats or in the vestry. The bride's brother at her entreaty was released, but bidden not to return to the church that day or interfere with his sister again on pain of death, while the rusty old knight was forced to climb a high tree, where he sat insecurely perched among the branches, feebly cursing the party as it departed. It was then approaching sundown, but none of the retainers or villagers dared rescue the imprisoned ones that night, for fear of Robin Hood's men. So it was not until sunup the next day that they were released. The bishop and the old knight, stiff as they were, did not delay longer than for breakfast, but so great was their rage and shame, made straight to Nottingham and levied the sheriff's forces. The sheriff himself was not anxious to try conclusions again with Robin in the open. Perhaps he had some slight scruples regarding his oath, but the others swore that they would go straight to the king if he did not help them, so he was fain to consent. A force of 100 picked men from the royal foresters and swordsmen of the shire was gathered together and marched straightway into the greenwood. There, as fortune would have it, they surprised some score of outlaws hunting, and instantly gave chase. But they could not surround the outlaws, who kept well in the lead, ever and anon dropping behind a log or boulder to speed back a shaft which meant mischief to the pursuers. One shaft indeed carried off the sheriff's hat and caused that worthy man to fall forward upon his horse's neck from sheer terror, while 5 other arrows landed in the fleshy parts of Forrester's arms. But the attacking party was not wholly unsuccessful. One outlaw in his flight stumbled and fell, when 2 others instantly stopped and helped to put him on his feet again. They were the widow's 3 sons, Stout Will and Lester and John. The pause was an unlucky one for them, as a party of sheriff's men got above them and cut them off from their fellows. Swordsmen came up in the rear, and they were soon hemmed in on every side. But they gave good account of themselves, and before they had been overborne by force of numbers, they had killed 2 and disabled 3 more. The infuriated attackers were almost on the point of hewing the stout outlaws to pieces, when the sheriff cried, "Hold! Bind the villains! We will follow the law in this and take them to the town jail, but I promise ye, the biggest public hanging that has been seen in this shire for many changes of the moon." So they bound the widow's 3 sons and carried them back speedily to Nottingham. Now Robin had not chanced to be near the scene of the fight, or with his men, so for a time he heard nothing of the happening. But that evening, while returning to the camp, he was met by the widow herself, who came weeping along the way. What news, good woman?" said Robin hastily but courteously, for he liked her well. "God save ye, Master Robin," said the dame wildly. "God keep ye from the fate that has met my 3 sons. The sheriff has laid hands on them, and they are condemned to die." "Now, by Our Lady, that cuts me to the heart. Stout Will and Lester and Merry John? The earliest friends I had in the band, and still among the bravest. It must not be. When is this hanging set?" "Middle the Tinker tells me that it is for tomorrow noon," replied the dame. "By the truth o' my body," quoth Robin, "you could not tell me in better time. The memory of the old days when you freely bade me sup and dine would spur me on, even if 3 of the bravest lads in all the shire were not imperilled. Trust to me, good woman." The old widow threw herself on the ground and embraced his knees. "The dire danger I am asking ye to face," she said weeping, "and yet I knew your brave true heart would answer me. Heaven help ye, good Master Robin, to answer a poor widow's prayers." Then Robin Hood sped straightway to the forest camp, where he heard the details of the skirmish. How that his men had been outnumbered 5 to 1, but got off safely, as they thought, until a count of their members had shown the loss of the widow's 3 sons. "We must rescue them, my men," quoth Robin, "even from out the shadow of the rope itself." Whereupon the band set to work to devise ways and means. Robin walked apart a little way with his head leaned thoughtfully upon his breast, for he was sore troubled. When whom should he meet but an old begging palmer, one of a devout order which made pilgrimages and wandered from place to place, supported by charity. This old fellow walked boldly up to Robin and asked alms of him, since Robin had been wont to aid members of his order. What news, this foolish old man?" said Robin. "What news, I do thee pray?" "3 squires in Nottingham town," quoth the palmer, "are condemned to die. Belike that is greater news than the shire has had in some Sundays." Then Robin's long-sought idea came to him like a flash. Change thy apparel with me, old man," he said, "and I'll give thee 40 shillings in good silver to spend in beer or wine." "Oh, thine apparel is good," the palmer protested, "and mine is ragged and torn. The Holy Church teaches that thou shouldst ne'er laugh an old man to scorn. I am in simple earnest, I say. Come, change thine apparel with mine. Here are 20 pieces of good broad gold to feast thy brethren right royally." So the palmer was persuaded, and Robin put on the old man's hat, which stood full high in the crown, and his cloak, patched with black and blue and red, like Joseph's coat of many colors in its old age, and his breeches, which had been sewed over with so many patterns that the original was scarce discernible, and his tattered hose, and his shoes, cobbled above and below. And while as he made the change in dress he made so many whimsical comments also about a man's pride and the dress that makes a man, that the palmer was like to choke with cackling laughter. I warrant you, the two were comical sights when they parted company that day. Natheless, Robin's own mother would not have known him, had she been living. The next morning the whole town of Nottingham was early astir, and as soon as the gates were open, country folk began to pour in, for a triple hanging was not held there every day in the week, and the bustle almost equated a fair day. Robin Hood in his palmer's disguise was one of the first ones to enter the gates, and he strolled up and down and around the town as though he had never been there before in all his life. Presently he came to the marketplace, and beheld thereon 3 gallows erected. "Who are these builded for, my son?" asked he of a rough soldier standing by. "For 3 of Robin Hood's men," answered the other, "and it were Robin himself, 'twould be thrice as high, I warrant ye. But Robin is too smart to get within the sheriff's clutches again." The palmer crossed himself. "They say that he is a bold fellow," he whined. "Ha!" said the soldier. "He may be bold enough out behind stumps in the forest, but the open marketplace is another matter." "Who is to hang these 3 poor wretches?" asked the palmer. "That hath the sheriff not decided. But here he comes now to answer his own questions." And the soldier came to stiff attention as the sheriff and his bodyguard stalked pompously up to inspect the gallows. "Oh, heaven save you, worshipful sheriff," said the palmer. "Heaven protect you. What will you give a silly old man today to be your hangman?" "Who are you, fellow?" asked the sheriff sharply. "Naught save a poor old palmer. But I can shrive their souls and hang their bodies most devoutly." "Very good," replied the other. "The fee today is 13 pence, and I will add thereunto some suits of clothing for that ragged back of yours." "God bless ye," said the palmer, and he went with the soldier to the jail to prepare his 3 men for execution. Just before the stroke of noon the doors of the prison opened, and the procession of the condemned came forth. Down through the long lines of packed people they walked to the marketplace, the palmer in the lead, and the widow's 3 sons marching firmly erect between soldiers. At the gallows foot they halted. The palmer whispered to them, as though offering last words of consolation, and the 3 men, with arms bound tightly behind their backs, ascended the scaffold, followed by their confessor. Then Robin stepped to the edge of the scaffold, while the people grew still as death, for they desired to hear the last words uttered to the victims. But Robin's voice did not quaver forth, weakly, as formerly, and his figure had stiffened bolt upright beneath the black robe that covered his rags. "Hark ye, proud Sheriff," he cried, "I was never a hangman in all my life, nor do I now intend to begin that trade. Accursed be he who first set the fashion of hanging. I have but 3 more words to say. Listen to them." And forth from the robe he drew his horn and blew 3 loud blasts thereon. Then his keen hunting knife flew forth, and in a trice stout Will, Lester, and Merry John were free men, and had sprung forward and seized the halberds from the nearest soldiers guarding the gallows. "Seize them, 'tis Robin Hood!" screamed the Sheriff, "and £100 if ye hold them, dead or alive." "I make it 200," roared the fat bishop. But their voices were drowned in the uproar that ensued immediately after Robin blew his horn. He himself had drawn his sword and leaped down the stairs from the scaffold, followed by his 3 men. The guard had closed around them in vain effort to disarm them, when "A rescuer!" shouted Will Stuteley's clear voice on one side of them, and "A rescue!" bellowed Little John's on the other, and down through the terror-stricken crowd rushed 80 men in Lincoln Green, their force seeming twice that number in the confusion. With swords drawn they fell upon the guard from every side at once. There was a brief clash of hot weapons, then the guard scattered wildly, and Robin Hood's men formed in a compact mass around their leader and forced their way slowly down the marketplace. "Seize them, in the King's name!" shrieked the Sheriff. "Close the gates!" In truth, the peril would have been even greater, had this last order been carried out. But Will Scarlet and Allen a Dale had foreseen that event and had already overpowered the 2 warders. So the gates stood wide open, and toward them the band of outlaws headed. The soldiers rallied a force of twice their number and tried resolutely to pierce their center. But the retreating force turned thrice and sent such volleys of keen arrows from their good yew bows that they kept a distance between the 2 forces. And thus the gate was reached, and the long road leading up the hill, and at last the protecting green wood itself. The soldiers dared come no farther, and the widow's 3 sons, I warrant you, supped more heartily that night than ever before in their whole lives. So ends Chapter 9. Chapter 10. How a Beggar Filled the Public Eye. Good Robin accosted him in his way, to see what he might be. If any beggar had money, he thought some part had he. One bright morning, soon after the stirring events told in the last chapter, Robin wandered forth alone down the road to Barnesdale, to see if aught had come of the Sheriff's pursuit. But all was still and serene and peaceful. No one was in sight save a solitary beggar who came sturdily along his way in Robin's direction. The beggar caught sight of Robin at the same moment as he emerged from the trees, but gave no sign of having seen him. He neither slackened nor quickened his pace, but jogged forward merrily, whistling as he came and beating time by punching holes in the dusty road with a stout pike-staff in his hand. The curious look of the fellow arrested Robin's attention, and he decided to stop and talk with him. The fellow was bare-legged and bare-armed, and wore a long shift of a shirt fastened with a belt. About his neck hung a stout, bulging bag, which was buckled by a good piece of leather thong. He had 3 hats upon his head, together sticked fast. He cared neither for the wind nor wet, in lands where'er he passed. The fellow looked so fat and hearty, and the wallet on his shoulder seemed so well filled, that Robin thought within himself, "Ha! This is a lucky beggar for me. If any of them have money, this is the chap, and marry, he should share it with us poorer bodies." So he flourished his own stick and planted himself in the traveller's path. "Sirrah, fellow," quoth he, "whither away so fast? Tarry, for I would have speech with ye." The beggar made as though he heard him not, and kept straight on with his faring. "Tarry, I say, fellow," said Robin again, "for there's a way to make folks obey." "Nay, 'tis not so," answered the beggar, speaking for the first time. "I obey no man in all England, not even the King himself. So let me pass on my way, for 'tis growing late, and I have still far to go before I can care for my stomach's good." "Now, by my troth," said Robin, once more getting in front of the other. "I see well by your fat countenance that you lack not for good food, while I go hungry. Therefore you must lend me of your means till we meet again, so that I may hie to the nearest tavern." "I have no money to lend," said the beggar crossly. "Methinks you are as young a man as I, and as well able to earn a supper. So go your way, and I'll go mine. If you fast till you get aught out of me, you'll go hungry for the next 12 month." "Not while I have a stout stick to thwack your saucy bones," cried Robin. "Stand and deliver, I say, or I'll dust your shirt for you. And if that will not teach you manners, then we'll see what a broad arrow can do with a beggar's skin." The beggar smiled and answered boast with boast. "Come on with your staff, fellow. I care no more for it than a pudding stick. As for your pretty bow, that for it." And with amazing quickness he swung his pike staff around and knocked Robin's bow clean out of his hand, so that his fingers smarted with pain. Robin danced and tried to bring his own staff into action, but the beggar never gave him a chance. Biff! Whack! came the pike staff, smiting him soundly and beating down his guard. There were but two things to do: either stand there and take a sound drubbing, or beat a hasty retreat. Robin chose the latter, as you or I would probably have done, and scurried back into the wood, blowing his horn as he went. "Fie, for shame, man!" jeered the bold beggar after him. "What is your haste? We had but just begun. Stay and take your money, else you will never be able to pay your reckoning at the tavern." But Robin answered him never a word. He fled up hill and down dale till he met three of his men who were running up in answer to his summons. "What is wrong?" they asked. "'Tis a saucy beggar," said Robin, clutching his breath. "He is back there on the high road with the hardest stick I've met in a good many days. He gave me no chance to reason with him, the dirty scamp." The men, Much and two of the widow's sons, could scarce conceal their mirth at the thought of Robin Hood running from a beggar. Natheless they kept grave faces and asked their leader if he was hurt. "Nay," he replied, "but I shall speedily feel better if you will fetch me that same beggar and let me have a fair chance at him." So the three yeomen made haste and came out upon the highroad and followed after the beggar, who was going smoothly along his way again, as though he were at peace with all the world. "The easiest way to settle this beggar," said Much, "is to surprise him. Let us cut through yon neck of woods and come upon him before he is aware." The others agreed to this, and the three were soon close upon their prey. "Now," quoth Much, and the other two sprang quickly upon the beggar's back and wrested his pike-staff from his hand. At the same moment Much drew his dagger and flashed it before the fellow's breast. "Yield you, my man," cried he, "for a friend of ours awaits you in the wood, to teach you how to fight properly." "Give me a fair chance," said the beggar valiantly, "and I'll fight you all at once." But they would not listen to him. Instead they turned him about and began to march him toward the forest. Seeing that it was useless to struggle, the beggar began to parley. "Good my masters," quoth he, "why use this violence? I will go with ye safe and quietly, if ye insist, but if ye will set me free, I'll make it worth your while. I've 100 pounds in my bag here. Let me go my way, and ye shall have all that's in the bag." The three outlaws took counsel together at this. "What say you?" asked Much of the others. "Our master will be more glad to see this beggar's wallet than his sorry face." The other two agreed, and the little party came to a halt and loosed hold of the beggar. "Count out your gold speedily, friend," said Much. There was a brisk wind blowing, and the beggar turned about to face it, directly they had unhanded him. "It shall be done, gossips," said he. "One of you lend me your cloak, and we will spread it upon the ground and put the wealth upon it." The cloak was handed him, and he placed his wallet upon it as though it were very heavy indeed. Then he crouched down and fumbled with the leather fastenings. The outlaws also bent over and watched the proceeding closely, lest he should hide some of the money on his person. Presently he got the bag unfastened and plunged his hands into it. Forth from it he drew, not shilling gold, but handfuls of fine meal which he dashed into the eager faces of the men around him. The wind aided him in this, and soon there arose a blinding cloud which filled the eyes, noses, and mouths of the three outlaws till they could scarcely see or breathe. While they gasped and choked and sputtered and felt around wildly for that rogue of a beggar, he finished the job by picking up the cloak by its corners and shaking it vigorously in the faces of his suffering victims. Then he seized a stick which lay conveniently near, and began to rain blows down upon their heads, shoulders, and sides, all the time dancing first on one leg, then on the other, and crying, "Villains! Rascals! Here are the £100 I promised. How do you like them? Aye, faith, you'll get all that's in the bag." Whack, 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 whack went the stick, emphasizing each word. Howls of pain might have gone up from the sufferers, but they had too much meal in their throats for that. Their one thought was to flee, and they stumbled off blindly down the road, the beggar following them a little way to give them a few parting love taps. "Fare ye well, my masters," he said finally, turning the other way, "and when next I come along the Barnesdale road, I hope you will be able to tell gold from meal dust." With this he departed, an easy victor, and again went whistling on his way, while the three outlaws rubbed the meal out of their eyes and began to catch their breath again. As soon as they could look around them clearly, they beheld Robin Hood leaning against a tree trunk and surveying them smilingly. He had recovered his own spirits in full measure on seeing their plight. "God save ye, gossips," he said. "Ye must, in sooth, have gone the wrong way and been to the mill, from the looks of your clothes." Then when they looked shamefaced and answered never a word, he went on in a soft voice, "Did ye see aught of that bold beggar I sent you for, lately?" "In sooth, master," responded Much, the miller's son, "we heard more of him than we saw him. He filled us so full of meal that I shall sweat meal for a week. I was born in a mill, and had the smell of meal in my nostrils from my very birth, you might say, and yet never before did I see such a quantity of the stuff in so small space." And he sneezed violently. "How was that?" asked Robin demurely. "Why, we laid hold of the beggar as you did order, when he offered to pay for his release out of the bag he carried upon his back." "The same I coveted," quoth Robin, as if to himself. "So we agreed to this," went on Much, and spread a cloak down, and he opened his bag and shook it thereon. Instantly a great cloud of meal filled the air, whereby we could neither see nor breathe, and in the midst of this cloud he vanished like a wizard. "But not before he left certain black and blue spots to be remembered by, I see," commented Robin. "He was in league with the evil one," said one of the widow's sons, rubbing himself ruefully. Then Robin laughed outright, and sat him down upon the gnarled root of a tree to finish his merriment. "Four bold outlaws put to rout by a sorry beggar," cried he. "I can laugh at ye, my men, for I am in the same boat with ye. But 'twould never do to have this tale get abroad, even in the greenwood, how that we could not hold our own with the odds in our favor. So let us have this little laugh all to ourselves, and no one else need be the wiser." The others saw the point of this, and felt better directly, despite their itching desire to get hold of the beggar again, and none of the four ever told of the adventure. But the beggar must have boasted of it at the next tavern, or a little bird, perched among the branches of a neighboring oak, must have sung of it, for it got abroad, as such tales will, and was put into a right droll ballad, which, I warrant you, the four outlaws did not like to hear. So ends Chapter 10. Chapter 11. How Robin Hood fought Guy of Gisborne. "I dwell by dale and down," quoth he, "and Robin to take I'm sworn, and when I am called by my right name, I am Guy of good Gisborne." Some weeks passed after the rescue of the widow's three sons, weeks spent by the sheriff in the vain effort to entrap Robin Hood and his men. For Robin's name and deeds had come to the King's ears in London town, and he sent word to the sheriff to capture the outlaw under penalty of losing his office. So the sheriff tried every manner of means to surprise Robin Hood in the forest, but always without success, and he increased the price put upon Robin's head, in the hope that the best men in the kingdom could be induced to try their skill at a capture. Now there was a certain Guy of Gisborne, a hireling knight of the King's army, who heard of Robin and of the price upon his head. Sir Guy was one of the best men at the bow and the sword in all the King's service. But his heart was black and treacherous. He obtained the King's leave forthwith to seek out the forester, and armed with the king's scroll he came before the sheriff at Nottingham. "I have come to capture Robin Hood," quoth he, "and mean to have him, dead or alive." "Right gladly would I aid you," answered the sheriff, "even if the king's seal were not sufficient warrant. How many men need you?" "None," replied Sir Guy, "for I am convinced that forces of men can never come at the bold robber. I must needs go alone. But do you hold your men in readiness at Barnesdale, and when you hear a blast from this silver bugle, come quickly, for I shall have the sly Robin within my clutches." "Very good," said the sheriff. "Marry, it shall be done." And he set about giving orders, while Guy of Gisborne sallied forth disguised. Now, as luck would have it, Will Scarlet and Little John had gone to Barnesdale that very day to buy suits of Lincoln green for certain of the yeomen who had come out at the knees and elbows. But not deeming it best for both of them to run their necks into a noose together, they parted just outside the town, and Will went within the gates, while John tarried and watched at the brow of the hill on the outside. Presently whom should he see but this same Will flying madly forth from the gates again, closely pursued by the sheriff and 60 men. Over the moat Will sprang, through the bushes and briars, across the swamp, over stocks and stones, up the woodland roads in long leaps like a scared jackrabbit. And after him puffed the sheriff and his men, their force scattering out in the flight as one man would tumble headfirst into a ditch, another mire up in the swamp, another trip over a rolling stone, and still others sit down on the roadside and gasp for wind like fish out of water. Little John could not forbear laughing heartily at the scene, though he knew that 'twould be anything but a laughing matter if Will should stumble. And in truth, one man was like to come upon him. It was William Atrent, the best runner among the sheriff's men. He had come within 20 feet of Scarlet and was leaping upon him with long bounds like a greyhound, when John rose up quickly, drew his bow, and let fly one of his fatal shafts. "It would have been better for William Atrent to have been abed with sorrow," says the ballad, "than to be that day in the green wood Slade to meet with Little John's arrow. He had run his last race." The others halted a moment in consternation, when the shaft came hurtling down from the hill, but looking up they beheld none save Little John, and with a cry of fierce joy they turned upon him. Meanwhile Will Scarlet had reached the brow of the hill and sped down the other side. "I'll just send one more little message of regret to the sheriff," said Little John, "before I join Will." But this foolhardy deed was his undoing, for just as the arrow left the string, a good yew bow that had never before failed him snapped in twain. Woe worth thee, wicked wood, that ere thou grew on a tree," cursed Little John, and planted his feet resolutely in the earth, resolved to sell the path dearly, for the soldiers were now so close upon him that he dared not turn. And a good right account of himself he gave that day, dealing with each man as he came up according to his merit. And so winded were the pursuers when they reached the top of the hill that he laid out the first 10 of them right and left with huge blows of his brawny fist. But if 5 men could do no more than 3, a score can overcome 1. A body of archers stood off at a prudent distance and covered Little John with their arrows. "Now yield you," panted the sheriff. "Yield you, Little John, or Reynold Greenleaf, or whatever else name you carry this day. Yield you, or some few of these shafts will reach your heart." "Marry, my heart has been touched by your words ere now," said Little John, "and I yield me." So the sheriff's men laid hold of Little John and bound him fast with many cords. So fearful were they lest he should escape. And the sheriff laughed aloud in glee, and thought of how he should avenge his stolen plate, and determined to make a good day's work of it. "By the saints," he said, "you shall be drawn by dale and down, and hanged high on a hill in Barnesdale this very day." "Hang and be hanged," retorted the prisoner. "You may fail of your purpose if it be Heaven's will." Back down the hill and across the moor went the company speedily, for they feared a rescue, and as they went the stragglers joined them. Here a man got up feebly out of the ditch and rubbed his pate, and fell in like a chicken with the pip going for its dinner. Yonder came hobbling a man with a lame ankle, or another with his shins torn by the briars, or another with his jacket all muddy from the marsh. So in truth it was a tatterdemalion crew that limped and straggled and wandered back into Barnesdale that day. Yet all were merry, for the sheriff had promised them flagons of wine, and moreover they were to hang speedily the boldest outlaw in England next to Robin Hood himself. The gallows was quickly put up and a new rope provided. "Now up with you," commanded the sheriff, "and let us see if your greenwood tricks will avail you tomorrow." "I would that I had bold Robin's horn," muttered poor John. "Methinks 'tis all up with me even as the sheriff hath spoken." In good sooth the time was dire and pressing. The rope was placed around the prisoner's neck, and the men prepared to haul away. "Are you ready?" called the sheriff. 1, 2, but before the 3 left his lips, the faint sound of a silver bugle came floating over the hill. "By my troth, that is Sir Guy of Gisborne's horn," quoth the sheriff, "and he bade me not to delay answering its summons. He has caught Robin Hood." "Pardon, Excellency," said one of his men, "but if he has caught Robin Hood, this is a merry day indeed, and let us save this fellow and build another gallows and hang them both together." "That's a brave thought," said the sheriff, slapping his knee. "Take the rascal down and bind him fast to the gallows tree against our return." So Little John was made fast to the gallows tree, while the sheriff and all his men who could march or hobble went out to get Robin Hood and bring him in for the double hanging. Let us leave talking of Little John and the sheriff and see what has become of Robin Hood. In the first place, he and Little John had come near having a quarrel that self-same morning because both had seen a curious-looking yeoman, and each wanted to challenge him singly. But Robin would not give way to his lieutenant, and that is why John, in a huff, had gone with Will to Barnesdale. Meanwhile Robin approached the curious-looking stranger. He seemed to be a 3-legged creature at first sight, but on coming nearer you would have seen that 'twas really naught but a poorly clad man, who for a freak had covered up his rags with a capel hide, nothing more nor less than the sun-dried skin of a horse, complete with head, tail, and mane. The skin of the head made a helmet, while the tail gave the curious 3-legged appearance. "Good morrow, good fellow," said Robin cheerily. "Methinks by the bow you bear in your hand that you should be a good archer." "Indifferent good," said the other, returning his greeting, "but 'tis not of archery that I am thinking this morning, for I have lost my way and would fain find it again." "By my faith, I could have believed 'twas your wits you'd lost," thought Robin, smiling. Then aloud, "I'll lead you through the wood," quoth he, "and you will tell me your business, for belike your speech is much gentler than your attire." "Who are you to ask me my business?" asked the other roughly. "I am one of the King's Rangers," replied Robin, "set here to guard his deer against curious-looking strollers." "Curious-looking I may be," returned the other, "but no stroller. Hark ye, since you are a ranger, I must e'en demand your service. I am on the King's business and seek an outlaw. Men call him Robin Hood. Are you one of his men?" eyeing him keenly. "Nay, God forbid," said Robin. "But what want you with him?" "That is another tale. But I'd rather meet with that proud outlaw than 40 good pounds of the King's money." Robin now saw how the land lay. "Come with me, good yeoman," said he, "and belike, a little later in the day, I can show you Robin's haunts when he is at home. Meanwhile let us have some pastime under the greenwood tree. Let us first try the mastery at shooting arrows." The other agreed, and they cut down 2 willow wands of a summer's growth that grew beneath a briar, and set them up at a distance of 60 yards. "Lead on, good fellow," quoth Robin. "The first shot to you." "Nay, by my faith," said the other, "I will follow your lead." So Robin stepped forth and bent his bow carelessly and sent his shaft whizzing toward the wand, missing it by a scant inch. He of the horsehide followed with more care, yet was a good 3 fingers' breadth away. On the second round the stranger led off and landed cleverly within the small garland at the top of the wand, but Robin shot far better and clave the wand itself clean at the middle. "A blessing on your heart," shouted Capelhide. "Never saw I such shooting as that. Belike you are better than Robin Hood himself, but you have not yet told me your name." "Nay, by my faith," quoth Robin, "I must keep it secret till you have told me your own." "I do not disdain to tell it," said the other. "I dwell by dale and down, and to take bold Robin am I sworn. This would I tell him to his face, were he not so great a craven. When I am called by my right name, I am Guy of Gisborne." This he said with a great show of pride, and he strutted back and forth, forgetful that he had just been beaten at archery. Robin eyed him quietly. "Methinks I have heard of you elsewhere. Do you not bring men to the gallows for a living?" "Aye, but only outlaws such as Robin Hood." "But pray, what harm has Robin Hood done you?" "He is a highway robber," said Sir Guy, evading the question. "Has he ever taken from the rich that he did not give again to the poor? Does he not protect the women and children and side with weak and helpless? Is not his greatest crime the shooting of a few king's deer?" "Have done with your sophistry," said Sir Guy impatiently. "I am more than ever of opinion that you are one of Robin's men yourself." "I have told you I am not," quoth Robin briefly. "But if I am to help you catch him, what is your plan?" "Do you see this silver bugle?" said the other. "A long blast upon it will summon the sheriff and all his men, when once I have Robin within my grasp. And if you show him to me, I'll give you the half of my 40 pounds reward." "I would not help hang a man for 10 times 40 pounds," said the outlaw. "Yet will I point out Robin to you for the reward I find at my sword's point. I myself am Robin Hood of Sherwood and Barnesdale." "Then have at you!" cried the other, springing swiftly into action. His sword leaped forth from beneath the horse's hide with the speed born of long practice, and before Robin had come to guard, the other had smitten at him full and foul. Robin eluded the lunge and drew his own weapon. "A scurvy trick," quoth he grimly, "to strike at a man unprepared." Then neither spoke more, but fell sternly to work. Lunge and thrust and ward and parry. For 2 full hours the weapons smote together sullenly, and neither Robin Hood nor Sir Guy would yield an inch. I promise you that if you could have looked forth on the fight from behind the trunk of some friendly tree, you would have seen deadly sport such as few men beheld in Sherwood Forest. For the fighters glared sullenly at each other, the fires of hatred burning in their eyes. One was fighting for his life, the other for a reward and the king's favor. Still circled the bright blades swiftly in the air, now gleaming in the peaceful sunlight, again hissing like maddened serpents. Neither had yet touched the other until Robin, in an unlucky moment, stumbled over the projecting root of a tree, when Sir Guy, instead of giving him the chance to recover himself as any courteous knight would have done, struck quickly at the falling man and wounded him in the left side. "Ah, dear Lady in heaven," gasped Robin, uttering his favorite prayer, "shield me now. 'Twas never a man's destiny to die before his day." And adroitly he sprang up again, and came straight at the other with an awkward but unexpected stroke. The knight had raised his weapon high to give a final blow, when Robin reached beneath and across his guard. One swift lunge, and Sir Guy of Gisborne staggered backward with a deep groan, Robin's sword through his throat. Robin looked at the slain man regretfully. "You did bring it upon yourself," said he, "and traitor and hireling though you were, I would not willingly have killed you." He looked to his own wound. It was not serious, and he soon staunched the blood and bound up the cut. Then he dragged the dead body into the bushes and took off the horse's hide and put it upon himself. He placed his own cloak upon Sir Guy and marked his face so none might tell who had been slain. Robin's own figure and face were not unlike the others. Pulling the capul hide well over himself so that the helmet hid most of his face, Robin seized the silver bugle and blew a long blast. It was the blast that saved the life of Little John over in Barnesdale, for you and I have already seen how it caused the fond sheriff to prick up his ears and stay the hanging, and go scurrying up over the hill and into the wood with his men in search of another victim. In 25 minutes up came running a score of the sheriff's best archers. "Did you signal us, lording?" they asked, approaching Robin. "Aye," said he, going to meet the puffing sheriff. What news, Sir Guy?" said the officer. "Robin Hood and Guy of Gisborne had a fight, and he that wears Robin's cloak lies under the covert yonder." "The best news I have heard in all my life," exclaimed the sheriff, rubbing his hands. "I would that we could have saved him for the hanging, though I cannot now complain." "The hanging?" repeated Robin. "Yes, this is our lucky day on the calendar. After you left me, we narrowly missed running one of the fellows, I believe 'twas Will Scarlet, to earth, and another who came to his relief we were just about to hang, when your horn blew." "Who was the other?" asked the disguised outlaw. "Whom do you suppose?" laughed the sheriff. "The best man in the greenwood, next to Robin Hood himself, Little John, Reinhold Greenleaf." For the sheriff could not forget the name Little John had borne under his roof at Nottingham. "Little John!" thought Robin with a start. Verily, that was a lucky blast of the bugle. "But I see you have not escaped without a scratch," continued the sheriff, becoming talkative through pure glee. "Here, one of you men, give Sir Guy of Gisborne your horse, while others of you bury that dog of an outlaw where he lies. And let us hasten back to Barnesdale and finish hanging the other." So they put spurs to their horses, and as they rode, Robin forced himself to talk merrily, while all the time he was planning the best way to succor Little John. "A boon, Sheriff," he said as they reached the gates of the town. "What is it, worthy sir? You have but to speak." "I do not want any of your gold, for I have had a brave fight. But now that I have slain the master, let me put an end to the man. So it shall be said that Guy of Gisborne dispatched the two greatest outlaws of England in one day." "Have it as you will," said the sheriff. "But you should have asked a knight's fee and double your reward, and it would have been yours. It isn't every man that can take Robin Hood." "No, Excellency," answered Robin. "I say it without boasting, that no man took Robin Hood yesterday, and none shall take him tomorrow." Then he approached Little John, who was still tied to the gallows tree, and he said to the sheriff's men, "Now stand you back here till I see if the prisoner has been shrived." And he stooped swiftly and cut Little John's bonds, and thrust into his hands Sir Guy's bow and arrows, which he had been careful to take. "'Tis I, Robin," he whispered. But in truth Little John knew it already, and had decided there was to be no hanging that day. Then Robin blew 3 loud blasts upon his own horn, and drew forth his own bow, and before the astonished sheriff and his men could come to arms, the arrows were whistling in their midst in no uncertain fashion. And look, through the gates and over the walls came pouring another flight of arrows. Will Scarlet and Will Stuteley had watched and planned a rescue ever since the sheriff and Robin rode back down the hill. Now in good time they came, and the sheriff's demoralized force turned tail and ran, while Robin and Little John stood under the harmless gallows, and sped swift arrows after them, and laughed to see them go. Then they joined their comrades and hasted back to the good greenwood, and there rested. They had got enough sport for one day. So ends Chapter 11. Chapter 12. How Maid Marian came back to Sherwood Forest. Also, how Robin Hood came before Queen Eleanor. But Robin Hood he himself had disguised, and Marian was strangely attired, that they proved foes, and so fell to blows, whose valor bold Robin admired. And when he came at London's court, he fell down on his knee. "Thou art welcome, Locksley," said the Queen, "and all thy good yeomanry." Now it fell out that one day not long thereafter, Robin was minded to try his skill at hunting, and not knowing whom he might meet in his rambles, he stained his face and put on a sorry-looking jacket and a long cloak before he sallied forth. As he walked, the peacefulness of the morning came upon him, and brought back to his memory the early days so long ago, when he had roamed these same glades with Marian. How sweet they seemed to him now, and how far away. Marian, too, the dainty friend of his youth, would he ever see her again? He had thought of her very often of late, and each time with increasing desire to hear her clear voice and musical laugh, and see her eyes light up at his coming. Perhaps the happiness of Allen a Dale and his lady had caused Robin's heartstrings to vibrate more strongly. Perhaps, too, the coming of Will Scarlet. But certes, Robin was anything but a hunter this bright morning as he walked along with head drooping in a most lovelorn way. Presently a hart entered the glade in full view of him, gazing peacefully, and instantly the man of action awoke. His bow was drawn, and a shaft all but loosed, when the beast fell suddenly, pierced by a clever arrow from the far side of the glade. Then a handsome little page sprang gleefully from the covert and ran toward the dying animal. This was plainly the archer, for he flourished his bow aloft, and likewise bore a sword at his side, though for all that he looked a mere lad. Robin approached the hart from the other side. "How dare you shoot the King's beasts, stripling?" he asked severely. "I have as much right to shoot them as the King himself," answered the page haughtily. "How dare you question me?" The voice stirred Robin strongly. It seemed to chime into his memories of the old days. He looked at the page sharply, and the other returned the glance, straight and unafraid. "Who are you, my lad?" Robin said more civilly. "No lad of yours, and my name's my own," retorted the other with spirit. "Softly, fair and softly, sweet page, or we of the forest will have to teach you manners," said Robin. "Not if you stand for the forest," cried the page, whipping out his sword. "Come, draw and defend yourself." He swung his blade valiantly, and Robin saw nothing for it but to draw likewise. The page thereupon engaged him quite fiercely, and Robin found that he had many pretty little tricks at fencing. Natheless, Robin contented himself with parrying, and was loath to exert all his superior strength upon the lad. So the fight lasted for above a quarter of an hour, at the end of which time the page was almost spent, and the hot blood flushed his cheeks in a most charming manner. The outlaw saw his distress, and to end the fight allowed himself to be pricked slightly on the wrist. "Are you satisfied, fellow?" asked the page, wincing a little at sight of the blood. "Aye, honestly," replied Robin, "and now perhaps you will grant me the honor of knowing to whom I owe this scratch." "I am Richard Partington, page to Her Majesty Queen Eleanor," answered the lad with dignity, and again the sound of his voice troubled Robin sorely. "Why come you to the greenwood alone, Master Partington?" The lad considered his answer while wiping his sword with a small lace kerchief. The action brought a dim, confused memory to Robin. The lad finally looked him again in the eye. "Forester, whether or no you be a king's man, know that I seek one Robin Hood, an outlaw, to whom I bring amnesty from the Queen. Can you tell me aught of him?" And while awaiting his answer, he replaced the kerchief in his shirt. As he did so, the gleam of a golden trophy caught the outlaw's eye. Robin started forward with a joyful cry. "Aye, I know you now, by the sight of yon golden arrow won at the sheriff's tourney. You are she on whom I bestowed it, and none other than Maid Marian." "You are—" gasped Marian, for it was she. "Not Robin?" "Robin's self," said he gaily, and forthwith, clad as he was in rags and stained of face, he clasped the dainty page close to his breast. And she forsooth yielded right willingly. "But Robin," she exclaimed presently, "I knew you not, and was rude, and wounded you." "'Twas nothing," he replied laughingly, "so long as it brought me you." But she made more ado over the sore wrist than Robin had received for all his former hurts put together. And she bound it with the little kerchief, and said, "Now 'twill get well." And Robin was convinced she spoke the truth, for he never felt better in all his life. The whole woods seemed tinged with a roseate hue since Marian had come again. But she, while happy also, was ill at ease, and Robin, with a man's slow discernment, at last saw that it was because of her boy's attire. He thought bluntly that there was naught to be ashamed of, but smilingly handed her his tattered long cloak, which she blushingly put on, and forthwith recovered her spirits directly. Then they began to talk of each other's varied fortunes, and of the many things which had parted them. And so much did they find to tell that the sun had begun to decline well into the afternoon before they realized how the hours sped. "But I am a sorry host," exclaimed Robin, springing to his feet. "I have not once invited you to my wild roof." "And I am but a sorry page," replied Marian, "for I had clean forgot that I was Richard Partington, and really did bring you a message from Queen Eleanor. Tell me on our way home, and there you shall be entrusted to Mistress Dale, while the first of my men we meet will I send back for your deer." So she told him, as they walked back through the glade, how that the fame of his prowess had reached Queen Eleanor's ears in London town, and the Queen had said, "Fain would I see this bold yeoman, and behold his skill at the longbow." and the Queen had promised him amnesty if he and 4 of his archers would repair to London against the next tournament the week following, there to shoot against King Henry's picked men, of whom the King was right vain. All this Marion told in detail, and added, "When I heard Her Majesty say she desired to see you, I asked leave to go in search of you, saying I had known you once. And the Queen was right glad, and bade me go, and sent this gold ring to you from off her finger in token of her faith." Then Robin took the ring, and bowed his head, and kissed it loyally. "By this token will I go to London town," quoth he, "and ere I part with the Queen's pledge, may the hand that bears it be stricken off at the wrist." By this time they were come to the grove before the cave, and Robin presented Maid Marian to the band, who treated her with the greatest respect. Will Scarlet was especially delighted to greet again his old-time friend, while Allen a Dale and his good wife bustled about to make her welcome in their tiny thatched cottage. That evening, after they had supped royally upon the very heart that Marian had slain, Allen sang sweet songs of northern minstrelsy to the fair guest as she sat by Robin's side, the golden arrow gleaming in her dark hair. The others all joined in the chorus, from Will Scarlet's baritone to Friar Tuck's heavy bass. Even Little John essayed to sing, although looked at threateningly by Much the miller's son. Then Robin bade Marian repeat her message from the Queen, which Marian did in a way befitting the dignity of her royal mistress. After which the yeomen gave 3 cheers for the Queen and 3 more for her page, and drank toast to them both, rising to their feet. "Ye have heard," quoth Robin, standing forth, "how that Her Majesty, whom God preserve, wishes but 4 men to go with me. Wherefore I choose Little John and Will Stuteley, my 2 lieutenants, Will Scarlet, my cousin, and Allen a Dale, my minstrel. Mistress Dale also can go with her husband and be company for the Queen's page. We will depart with early morning, decked in our finest. So stir ye, my lads, and see that not only your tunics are fresh, but your swords bright and your bows and arrows fit, for we must be a credit to the Queen as well as the good greenwood. You, Much, and stout Will, Lester, and John, the widow's 3 sons, shall have command of the band while we are away, and Friar Tuck shall preside over the needs of your souls and stomachs." The orders were received with shouts of approval, and toasts all around were drunk again in not brown ale, ere the company dispersed to rest after making ready for the journey. The next morning was as fine a summer's day as ever you want to see, and the green leaves of the forest made a pleasing background for the gay picture of the yeomen setting forth. Says the old ballad, "It was a seemly sight to see how Robin Hood himself had dressed, and all his yeomanry. He clothed his men in Lincoln green, and himself in scarlet red, with hats of black and feathers white, to bravely deck each head. Nor were the 2 ladies behindhand, I ween, at the bedecking." Thus the chosen party of 7 sallied forth, being accompanied to the edge of the wood by the whole band, who gave them a merry parting and God-speed. The journey to London town was made without incident. The party proceeded boldly along the King's highroad, and no man met them who was disposed to say them nay. Besides, the good Queen's warrant and ring would have answered for them, as indeed it did at the gates of London. So on they sped, and in due course came to the palace itself and awaited audience with the Queen. Now the King had gone that day to Finsbury Field, where the tourney was soon to be held, in order to look over the lists and see some of his picked men, whom he expected to win against all comers. So much had he boasted of these men that the Queen had secretly resolved to win a wager of him. She had heard of the fame of Robin Hood and his yeomen, as Marian had said, and Marian on her part had been overjoyed to be able to add a word in their favor and to set out in search of them. Today the Queen sat in her private audience room chatting pleasantly with her ladies, when in came Mistress Marian Fitzwalter, attired again as befitted her rank of lady in waiting. She curtsied low to the Queen and awaited permission to speak. "How now," said the Queen, smiling, "is this my Lady Marian, or the page Richard Partington?" "Both, an it please your Majesty. Richard found the man you sought, while Marian brought him to you." "Where is he?" asked Queen Eleanor eagerly. "Awaiting your audience, he and 4 of his men, likewise a lady of whose wooing and wedding I can tell you a pretty story at another time." "Have them admitted." So Marian gave orders to a herald, and presently Robin Hood and his little party entered the room. Now the Queen had half expected the men to be rude and uncouth in appearance because of their wild life in the forest, but she was delightfully disappointed. Indeed, she started back in surprise and almost clapped her hands. For, sooth to say, the yeomen made a brave sight, and in all the court no more gallant men could be found. Marion felt her cheeks glow with pride at sight of the half-hidden looks of admiration sent forth by the other ladies in waiting. Robin had not forgot the gentle arts taught by his mother, and he wore his fine red velvet tunic and breeches with the grace of a courtier. We have seen before what a dandified gentleman Will Scarlet was, and Allan a Dale, the minstrel, was scarcely less goodly to look upon, while the giant Little John and broad-shouldered Will Stuteley made up in stature what little they lacked in outward polish. Mistress Dale, on her part, looked even more charming, if possible, than on the momentous day when she went to Plympton Church to marry one man and found another. Thus came the people of the greenwood before Queen Eleanor in her own private audience room, and Robin advanced and knelt down before her and said, "Here I am, Robin Hood, I and my chosen men. At your Majesty's bidding am I come, bearing the ring of amnesty which I will protect, as I would protect your Majesty's honor, with my life." "Thou art welcome, Locksley," said the Queen, smiling graciously. "Thou art come in good time, thou and all thy brave yeomanry." Then Robin presented each of his men in turn, and each fell on his knee and was greeted with most kindly words. And the Queen kissed fair Mistress Dale upon the cheek, and bade her remain in the palace with her ladies while she was in the city. And she made all the party be seated to rest themselves after their long journey. Fine wines were brought, and cake, and rich food, for their refreshment. And as they ate and drank, the Queen told them further of the tourney to be held at Finsbury Field, and of how she desired them to wear her colors and shoot for her. Meantime, she concluded, they were to lie by quietly and be known of no man. To do all this, Robin and his men pledged themselves full heartily. Then, at the Queen's request, they related to her and her ladies some of their merry adventures, whereat the listeners were vastly entertained and laughed heartily. Then Marion, who had heard of the wedding at Plympton Church, told it so drolly that tears stood in the Queen's eyes from merriment. "My Lord Bishop of Hereford," she said, "'twas indeed a comical business for him. I shall keep that to twit his bones, I promise you. So this is our minstrel?" she added presently, turning to Allan a Dale. "Methinks I have already heard of him. Will he not harp awhile for us today?" Allan bowed low, and took a harp which was brought to him, and he thrummed the strings and sang full sweetly the border songs of the north country, and the Queen and all her ladies listened in rapt silence till all the songs were ended. So ends chapter 12.